North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. Welcome to the broadcast. We bring you the news. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We report on each. Then what we do is I make commentary. That's not the news. More about that in a second. Then we debate. That's not the news either, but it wouldn't be the first time that debate on the Wells Report became news. Here's what we got going. My commentary is just my opinion. It is no more valuable or less valuable than yours, but certainly welcome, at least yours is, at any moment. So make sure that what you do is you check in with us. You can do so with a chat room on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And also, by the way, Commentante Grand Magnus, really? Seriously, J.E.? You're throwing out the Latin this morning, huh? Or actually, it's this afternoon, isn't it? Anyway, also, you can call me on the telephone. Operator is standing by right here. This elaborate phone system is ready to take your phone call and put you on this very broadcast. So let it happen. I've been working in the studio. And I don't know whether you can notice or not, but this stuff right here is all different. This stuff is all different. Yeah. And yeah. And so it doesn't look like I've done anything, but I have. And there's more to do, and I've been working my butt off. So there you go. Let's get busy, shall we? We bring you the news. We analyze for fact and bias. We make commentary, then we debate. And here's the news. A federal judge over the weekend, actually yesterday, granted former President Donald Trump's request to appoint a special master to review materials the FBI seized from Mar-a-Lago last month. This from CNN. The decision from Federal District Judge Eileen Cannon is a significant victory for the former president who railed against the Biden administration and Justice Department since the search was executed 4 weeks ago. As a function of the plaintiff's former position as President of the United States, the stigma associated with the subject's seizure is in a league of its own, said Cannon. A future indictment, based to any degree on property that ought to be returned, would result in reputational harm of a decidedly different order of magnitude. Cannon ordered that a third-party attorney from outside the government be brought in to review the materials that were taken from Trump's home and resort in Florida. The order also halts the Justice Department from continuing its review of materials seized from Mar-a-Lago, pending completion of the special master's review or further court order. The classification review and intelligence assessments being conducted by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, however, will be allowed to continue. Both sides have until this Friday to nominate a special master candidate and their specific duties. Trump's lawyers argued that a special master was needed because they don't trust the Justice Department or fairly identify privileged materials that would need to be excluded from the ongoing criminal probe. Trump blasted the Justice Department and the seizure at his rally in Pennsylvania over the weekend. Quote, "This egregious abuse of the law is going to produce a backlash, the likes of which nobody has ever seen. These same exact people at Justice and FBI, these same exact people along with outside scum are at it again with a horrific raid of my home. They just go on, and they have to be stopped," unquote. Cannon wrote that President Trump had not proven that his constitutional rights were disregarded. The court agrees with the government that, at least based on the record to date, there has not been a compelling showing of callous disregard for the plaintiff's constitutional rights, she wrote. But Cannon cited several reasons for bringing in the special master, among them the interest in ensuring the integrity of an orderly process amidst swirling allegations of bias and media leaks. She also cited the historic nature of the case. The judge said the special master will be tasked with reviewing seized property for personal items and documents and potentially privileged material subject to the claims of the attorney-client and/or executive privilege. She added the court is mindful that restraints on criminal prosecutions are disfavored, but finds that these unprecedented circumstances called for a brief pause to allow for neutral third-party review to ensure a just process with adequate safeguards. This goes on to say the Justice Department has said that its own filter team already finished its review of the Mar-a-Lago documents and found a small set of attorney-client privileged records. Now, we went through this on Friday. We went through the entire affidavit, actually the new list of things that were taken during the Mar-a-Lago raid. We went through that step by step by step. And there were relatively few federal government documents that could not be explained by either executive privilege or personal privilege of the president. I mean, there were thousands upon thousands of government records that had no classification markings whatsoever. That looks to me like it's the basis of a memoir. It doesn't look to me like there's some arch conspiracy to keep the National Archives from having the papers of Donald Trump. There were some classified information there. There was some classified information. And moreover, there were folders that apparently contained classified information. I want to know what happened to the folders' contents because they were empty. So that's what I'm trying to figure out at this particular moment. That's what I saw. But a special master is going to go through this and probably return to President Trump maybe as much as 60 or even 70% of the stuff that was taken. And that begins to build a preponderance of evidence that says, yes, indeed, President Trump's constitutional rights have indeed been violated. Also, we don't know whether or not Judge Cannon got to see the original affidavit establishing probable cause. I doubt that she did. I am very much interested in finding out whether or not she saw that affidavit. Because her decision making would have been affected either way. Now, there are some things about this decision that I find extremely encouraging. She is the first official of the government, Justice Department, Justice Branch, Judicial Branch, Legislative Branch, Executive Branch, to recognize the status of President Donald Trump as someone outside the typical federal investigation bubble. She's also the first to understand that President Trump's former life as the President of the United States does create a pretext for incredible reputational harm based on what is very little more than just simple political innuendo. Now, remember, we haven't seen anything legal here. We don't know what the ideas are. But at this particular moment, the DOJ and the FBI and all of the what has been called the deep state is treading on very, very tenuous ground. They've already been sanctioned for lying before the federal court by the FISA court. They have been just caught red-handed, mangling information, evidence, altering evidence in order to keep a wiretap into the Trump campaign going through the FISA court. That court, by the way, set up by the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, by the way, set up after 2001, the 9/11 attacks in 2001. And has not been used to do much about terrorism at all, but has done plenty to affect the electoral and simple life of Americans in these United States. We have gone from a relatively free and constitutionally protected state to a surveillance state that is, at this point, as we have this conversation, is virtually unbridled. Now, to this, we have to add this amazing political dynamic, this unbelievable political dynamic that tells the current administration, the current government of the United States, that they can, at will, run over long-standing ideas, long-standing procedures, long-standing understandings about how you treat an ex-president. There is no other president on this planet that would ever, ever condone a search like has happened with Donald Trump. I mean, think about what would have happened. Think about what would have happened if, say, for example, President Obama's private residence had been raided by the FBI under these circumstances. Two things would happen. The country would melt down because the mainstream media would say, okay, it's okay to melt down now because it's not President Trump. Thing number two that would happen, I would be just as angry about a raid on President Obama's home as I am about this raid on President Trump's home. I would point out the exact same things in the exact same order at the exact same time. I'd be asking for a special master to go through the 33 million pieces of paper that President Obama took home with him. Presidents of the United States are protected in at least intent by the framers of this nation to avoid this exact kind of politically based, quote unquote, law enforcement. They are protected. That's the intent of the way things are built in the Constitution and throughout the Bill of Rights, etc., and the Federalist Papers, when you start thinking about how a president is treated and why they gave these presidents extraordinary power in the nation. Because they are a single point target for all kinds of political miscreancy. And we have seen it. We have seen it. I was writing something in Facebook over the weekend. I said at some point we're going to have to do something about how we impeach presidents. They can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay, what are those? We need to identify what those are. I would suggest we start with the U.S. Code in case we can actually snag the President of the United States in some kind of criminal act. Not in an act that's inconvenient for another political party that can be spun, twisted, warped into some sort of criminal act. I'm talking about a real criminal act. I'm talking about something that is beyond a political, something that can be defined politically. I'm talking about some serious business here that we have to really start taking part in. Now, the Democrats really don't have to worry about this because it's never happened before. Republicans never crossed this threshold with the Democrats either. This is the first time this has happened, that a president of the United States has been impeached twice. And for serious violations. President Clinton was impeached for lying in a federal court. Has President Trump lied in a federal court? Has he actually done anything wrong? If he'd done anything wrong, it'd already be on the front page of the New York Times. We have work to do in this nation. The people that we currently have doing the work of the nation are not capable of it. An election is coming. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Hey, support us. Would you please support the report? How do you do that? Well, you can go to Patreon. You make a contribution to this broadcast. Please do. You can subscribe for not so many bucks. You can make an outright donation if you'd like. It would be nice because this is an independent effort. I'm doing it. There is no support, although I'm trying to get some more support for the broadcast through radio means and other means. But right now, it's just me and you and your friends, of course. So let's spend a little bit of time seeing what we can do to support this broadcast if you find it worthy, and I certainly hope you do. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Please join us if you will. A federal judge's decision. This from the New York Times. This is Charlie Savage. Charlie Savage is, well, named appropriately, especially when it comes to partisan political opinion. And this from the New York Times, as I said. Federal judge's extraordinary decision to interject in the criminal investigation into former President Donald Trump's hoarding of sensitive documents at his Florida residence showed unusual solicitude to him, according to legal specialists. Well, once again, it depends on who you talk to and what you hear when they spend time talking. Like, for example, the use of the word hoarding. Okay. I don't recall you using that term when President Obama took 33 million documents out of the White House. Let's move on. According to Stephen Vladek, the law professor at the University of Texas, hook 'em horns, this was an unprecedented intervention by a federal district judge into the middle of an ongoing federal criminal and national security investigation, unquote. Siding with Trump, the judge, Eileen M. Cannon, ordered the appointment of an independent arbiter to review the more than 11,000 government records the FBI seized in March at Mar-a-Lago. She granted the arbiter, known as a special master, broad powers that extended beyond filtering materials that were potentially subject to attorney-client privilege to also include executive privilege. Now, this is interesting. At least this is interesting to me. When I read that, I sat there and I said, this is what happens when you're just a little bit too clever for yourself. Yeah, this is what happens. So the Biden administration was in their particular meanderings through what to do in this circumstance with Donald Trump. All these people were trying to figure out just exactly how they were going to try to get some of these documents. And so what ended up happening was it came down to the President of the United States, Joe Biden, rescinding the executive privilege of his predecessor. And that's something that a lot of people thought that President Biden was going to do. But in reality, what ended up happening is that the Biden administration left it to a decision made by the National Archivist in the National Archives and Records Administration. And that person said, yes, you can see all these papers. Oops, that was a mistake. So in other words, President Donald Trump's executive privilege was rescinded not by the President of the United States, which would set a precedent that Joe Biden would regret for the rest of his life, and his family would regret, and historians would regret, because we don't want to see the things involved in the behind the scenes workings of the Biden administration. We just don't want to see it. It would damage the country. But so what we have here is we have now a precedent set for a special master to reestablish the executive privilege of the former president of the United States. This was a tactical mistake by the Biden administration. More about that coming up in just a couple of moments. You are listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back in just a few with more news, analysis, and commentary. Thanks for joining us today. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I just read something on the chat room. Very amusing. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. So you can debate. This is an interactive broadcast. This is news, and it's interactive. Okay, imagine calling Lester Holt up on set and saying, Lester, what are you talking about? Well, you can do that here. It's your prerogative. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. All right, so you can also join the chat, like I said, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. We've been talking about this special master thing. It would be just moments after the decision by Judge Eileen Cannon. Wouldn't surprise me if Mr. Charlie Savage of the New York Times had already had this column written. But what we have here is we have a circumstance whereby executive privilege, we were just discussing this, executive privilege is now being determined by relatively low-level bureaucrats. Now, a special master to be named in this Mar-a-Lago Papers case, we don't know the background of that person, but I assure you that the sitting head of the National Archives and Records Administration is a low-level bureaucrat in comparison to what we're dealing with here. And so now we're in a position where we have Judge Cannon, who is a Trump appointee sitting on the federal district court for the Southern District of Florida, now being castigated by Charlie Savage of the New York Times for perhaps, being partisan and being in the debt of Donald Trump. And the thing about it was, what I find interesting about this entire thing is she's using virtually the identical phraseology, wording, and points I was making on Friday when I said she simply must appoint a special master. This is not your typical case. This is a former president of the United States. There are completely different dynamics at work here, and at least Eileen Cannon understood those things. And I find that to be extremely refreshing, and I think that that's essentially important to this case. Now, as I said, when I was talking about this special master, this can work to the benefit of everyone, not necessarily to the benefit of Donald Trump, not necessarily to the benefit of say, for example, forces arrayed against Donald Trump. There are going to be things here that can change the overall dynamic. And I would say that just as it was the wrong person, the director of the National Archives and Records Administration, to make a determination of that kind of import regarding Donald Trump's executive privilege, it's equally as dumb to have a special master. We have no idea where this person is, who this person is, who the judge is going to pick, the federal judiciary, actually not the judiciary, but the prosecution of this, the federal attorneys, the U.S. attorneys are going to nominate people. The Trump side is going to nominate people, and Judge Cannon is going to pick. Okay. All right. Is that somebody that should be determining executive privilege of a former president? The answer is no. The only thing that we can get out of this, which will be good, the only thing that we can get out of this is a definition of who executive privilege is controlled by. I would suggest it's controlled in the classified document world. In the classified document world, the originator of the document classifies it and controls the classification. That's with anybody. There's not this overarching committee of classification that sits over. No, that's not the way it works. You can write a document and say that it's classified if you want to. Now, it may end up in front of a court or in front of a judge somewhere who'll say, no, this doesn't merit this classification. They can declassify it. But from the time that you decide what the classification is, if you decide that it's top secret, that's fine. It's top secret. until somebody says, I need that document. No, I'm sorry, it's top secret. They'll take you to court and so on and so on. But that's a federal court. That's very much like this. Now, you'll note that the circumstance involved in the possibility of taking on Judge Eileen Cannon is relatively muted. Charlie Savage can't keep his mouth shut, so he just spews. He is the Screedmeister General of the New York Times. So he's going to say something. But it isn't just a, it's not just a circumstance where this particular judge can be just wiped away as a partisan creature, because she's doing the right thing here. And I'm pleased that Eileen Cannon did what she did. Because once again, as I said earlier, former presidents, regardless of party, must have the same kind of protection that they have while they're in office when they get out of office. As far as I'm concerned, the President of the United States should have classification control of the documents that are generated or dealt with in his administration in the context in which they were dealt with. Now, there are things like, say, for example, if some president, is trying to figure out what type of weapon to use under what circumstance. And let's say that weapon is classified. The actual workings of that weapon are classified. So he gets a report on what this weapon can do and what it can't do and so on, the ins and outs of it. That's a top secret SCI document. And so he looks at it and he says, okay, under my ideas of executive privilege rules, the decision of using the particular weapon or not, with the possible weapon name being deleted, that can go with his personal papers. But any details about the weapon and so on, the actual weapon name, the actual sources, the capabilities, and so on, must be redacted. But that piece of paper can belong to the president. Now, if someone wants to come along and, say, for example, classify it afterwards, that's a different kettle of fish. So what could have happened, instead of just doing away with President Trump's executive privilege, say, for example, when they were saying it was all these nuclear codes and stuff. Well, okay. Well, then reclassify those documents. But there were no nuclear codes. That was basically just a pretext floated out there by the Department of Justice. Really? They threw that out there just to be able to sort of justify what they were doing. This is awful. This is just plain awful. And I don't have any idea how they're going to fix it. I literally have no idea how they're going to fix this. But this is at least a good first step. So what is a special master and how does it work? Special masters, this from USA Today, carry out some specific action at the court's direction, which are as diverse as the actions taken by the court, according to the Legal Information Institute. The special master appointed in Trump's case will oversee the Justice Department review of documents seized from Mar-a-Lago, removing any privileged material that might have been taken in the search. Special masters have acted in a large range of cases, from divorce and child custody cases to the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 terror attacks. After those attacks, Washington attorney Kenneth Feinberg was appointed as special master of the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. He was responsible for distributing government funds for death and injury claims related to the attacks. His work is the subject of the Netflix biopic Worth, in which Feinberg is played by actor Michael Keaton. In 1997, a judge appointed a special master in the Microsoft versus United States case to advise the court on technical issue and investigate claims like Microsoft's suggestion that Windows would be made slower if Internet Explorer were to be removed, according to the Legal Information Institute. In a case similar to Trump's, a special master was appointed to oversee the document review and the federal investigation of the ex-president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Cohen's legal team argued at the time that a special master appointment was necessary to ensure documents covered by attorney-client privilege were not reviewed by the government. They also claimed a special master appointment would protect the integrity of the government's investigation from the toxic partisan politics of the day, which are certainly in play here. Special masters also appear in original jurisdiction cases, frequently involving boundary disputes between the states, decided by the Supreme Court, according to the Legal Information Institute. So there you go. So that's what this is all about. Now, why, say, for example, would President Trump want a special master? Well, in the filing, the former president's lawyer argued the search was both political and overly broad because it authorized FBI agents to seize boxes of documents merely because they were physically found together with other items purportedly within the scope of the warrant. Yeah, that's a problem. That's an absolute problem. They just took everything. And the warrant was overly broad, so arguably they could take everything, but that's overly broad. The Justice Department, on the other hand, claimed the appointment of the special master would impede the government's investigation. In fact, that is true, because Judge Cannon has stopped the Justice Department review of the documents. And the reason they have stopped the Justice Department review of the documents is because there are things in there they're not supposed to see. And which is why they should not have taken every possible document in the first place. What they've done is they have at least created a problem where there can be evidence between that came from pieces of paper that were between President Trump and his lawyers that the federal government has absolutely no access to, that can be argued about as evidentiary in court and tossed if they ever do get into court. I don't think that's going to happen. I do not believe that's going to happen. And the agency simply has lost its credibility from a standpoint, and they did it to themselves. When they lied to the FISA court and got caught, that was over. That was over. So what's going to happen next? The Justice Department told USA Today it was reviewing the decision. The United States is examining the opinion and will consider the appropriate next steps in ongoing litigation. This according to Deputy Spokesman Anthony Coley. I suppose they can appeal. But if I were them, I wouldn't. Why wouldn't I? The reason is because at some point, with every move to impede transparency in this case, the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, and the FBI looks worse and worse and worse. You know, a lot of people said when they pulled off this raid on Mar-a-Lago that they better have the goods on the president. And it doesn't look like they do. Because if they indeed did have the goods, on the president, we'd already know about them by now. Because they leak. They've already leaked stuff up to this point. And I don't know who's actually calling the shots on this, which is obviously at least a politically tactical skirmish between the government of the United States and Donald Trump. It may be all-out war, but I don't know who's directing the government side. But they're making some really stupid mistakes. Like that photograph, for example. What a flipping error. What a mistake. It's just a mistake. And there are other things that they've done that they just shouldn't do. You know, they shouldn't necessarily say, for example, they may be thinking about appealing this decision. They need to tamp this down. They need to try to walk away from this case as fast as they possibly can. Because if they don't, there's going to be huge problems in the future. Both for President Trump and President Biden and President post-Biden and on and on and on. The Democrat Party playing cards. The Democrat Party and the leftist politicians are playing cards that they should not be playing. The only thing that can justify it is that President Trump has information that is so damaging to the American left and the Democrat Party that any damage they undergo, the Justice Department, the FBI, any damage that they undergo because of what they're doing will be less than the damage that President Trump will do to the Justice Department and the FBI and all of these other agencies that are running for the hills, screaming at the top of their lungs. In other words, the damage they're undergoing now by looking shady must be better than what they think is going to happen if Donald Trump is the president again. And that should kind of scare all of us. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Hello. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. So what's the bottom line in all this? What is the bottom line in the new special master? According to CNN, the primary takeaway is simple. The ruling is a major legal win for President Trump. But it's not just President Trump. It's also a legal win for fairness and essentially discipline and calm. All of us should take from this the solace that comes from at least there's a part of this that is fair. Many, many people, tens of millions of people in the United States believe that what happened in Mar-a-Lago is unfair. At least this part of this, thanks to a federal district judge in southern Florida, is at least moving back toward a fair process because of this decision. Very good. It is very good. Okay. It's a mess. But at least this judge is moving forward. A major legal win for Trump. That's secondary. The real win is fairness. Now, this is also a warning for the FBI and the DOJ, because at least there is one federal judge, Eileen Cannon, who now buys into the idea that the FBI and the DOJ have damaged themselves significantly from a credibility standpoint. That is a very serious thing. The Trump lawyers question whether the investigators could be trusted properly to filter through the thousands of documents that were seized. The judge rejected the Justice Department assurance that its internal filter team had already sorted through the material. Ultimately, the special master appointment may merely lead to a delay in the federal investigation into documents taken at Mar-a-Lago, but now at least introduces a new layer of fairness. CNN calls it uncertainty and unpredictability into the investigation. Gary asked something in the chat room. He said, well, what if the special master is corrupt? That's a problem. That's a problem. The special master can be corrupt. He can be political. He can be partisan. And now I'm going to say something that you need to hear. A special master that is partisan to the left is horrible. A special master that is partisan to the right is horrible. Now, we have seen that it's nearly impossible to find a jurist that doesn't have some kind of politics. That's why there's a conservative and a liberal wing of the Supreme Court of the United States. I mean, it's ridiculous. To find somebody that's right down the center line is almost impossible. The closest you can get to that is what we need here. We need somebody that can be trusted to be fair and equitable to both sides. Now, this is kind of one-sided anyway, because what they're trying to figure out is, okay, what is the exact executive privilege of all these documents? There will be a fight that will continue in a federal court regarding the nature of President Trump's classification abilities and his understandings of classification abilities. He is the sole arbiter of classification in the United States. Now, there may indeed be a standard policy or an SOP, a standard operating policy, where documents are declassified. But those documents that are declassified usually come from CIA, DOJ, FBI, the executive branch agencies. This is different. This comes from a president. So there is no interference between a president and his classification abilities. There is none. Now, does that need to be redefined in a court of law? Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. Because I got to be perfectly honest with you. You know, the classification documents that we have in the United States are classified for a very, very good reason. But I believe that a set of documents that are arguably in the ownership of any given president should remain in the ownership of any given president. This is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a big thing on executive privilege. And the better definition of executive privilege that will hopefully emerge from that kind of thing will once again benefit the nation. It may harm various political factions at various times, but this is what happens when you decide to gamble. The Biden administration decided to gamble on all this. And what they have not thought of is all of the downstream effects of their decision making, all the precedents that they have set. Something tells me they're going to rue the day that they decided to raid Mar-a-Lago. And they should. And I'd be saying this again if any former president's home was pilfered for the sake of politics. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. You should stay where you are. This is the end of hour number 1. The second hour of this broadcast for today is coming up next. Thanks for being with us today. And there you go. And there you go. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Welcome to the broadcast. What do we do here that's different than any other broadcast you can find? Well, we honestly report the news, the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each, both fact and bias. I make commentary and we debate. My commentary is not the news. My commentary is simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours. The debate is the interaction of all of these things together, with the express purpose of having more truth at the end of this broadcast than we did when we began. This is the Wells Report. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has, in the past several days, done what I consider to be serious damage to the United States of America, the Democrat Party, and the Republican Party, and his legacy. He has done so by making ridiculous statements having to do with his political opposition. He has called 74 million Americans fascists. You know, there's no coming back from that. The president is trying. He's doing everything he possibly can. He's doing everything he possibly can to back away from it. Well, you know, not all MAGA Republicans are bad. Excuse me? And nobody has nailed the president or anybody else on the left for saying, so if MAGA is bad, that means you don't want to make America great again? Well, there's nothing wrong with America. America's great. Oh, really? What about inflation? What about energy? What about all this gobbledygooking and political garbage regarding getting rid of the internal combustion engine? If America's so great, if you think it's great, still great, then you need to define your terms, and they don't want to get into that debate. Making America great again is easy to define, since most Americans believe that the number one threat to freedom and liberty in the United States is this government. All you got to do is say, hey, to make America great, what we need to do is curtail the power of the federal government. See, this is a political loser for the Democrat Party and the left. This whole thing is a mistake. This is going to put a very serious blot on President Biden's legacy. It's damaged the Democrat Party. And it has also frightened the people of the United States. You see, the people of the United States are the people of the United States because we have been given this land, and we are the stewards of a land based on freedom and liberty, and based on inbred skepticism, if not skepticism built into the DNA of the very bones of this nation. Skepticism of power, skepticism of people who wield it. And so there is deep skepticism about the federal government of the United States at every level. And the President Trump is President Biden is making it worse. All you brave right-wing Republicans fighting for freedoms of Americans. If you're going to take on the government, you better bring an F-15. Oh, really, Mr. President? You see, the logical corollary of that is because the F-15, the government will bring F-15s against us. Are you seriously thinking about using air power against your own citizens? You've called us fascists. I mean, where does it stop? But in Labor Day swing state trips, this according to the Associated Press, President Joe Biden excoriated MAGA Republicans and the extreme right, pitching personal Labor Day appeals to swing state union members who he hopes will turn out in force for his party in November. I don't have any idea why unions would turn out for the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is responsible for destroying the union labor movement in the United States. Everybody was worried about, Republican presidents trying to break unions. Nobody's done more damage to every union in the United States than the Democrat Party. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. Biden said that the middle class built America. The middle class builds every government and every country. Everybody knows it, but unions built the middle class. Well, they define the middle class. They define the middle class. What built the middle class was prosperity. What built the middle class was a government of the United States working to the benefit of the people instead of the benefit of politics. Later, he flew to Mifflin, just outside Pittsburgh, returning to Pennsylvania for the third time in less than a week, and just 2 days after his predecessor, Donald Trump, staged his own rally in the state. Labor Day traditionally starts the political busy season. Campaigns scramble to excite voters for Election Day, November 8th. I think it's 62 days now. 62 days. And so the president was made in his own Wilkes-Barre trip last week to discuss increasing funding for police, to decry GOP criticism of the FBI after the raid on Trump's Florida state, and to argue that new bipartisan gun measures can help reduce violent crime. Good luck on selling all of that. It's going to be impossible for the Democrat Party to, in the hearts and minds of Americans, in my humble opinion, to be able to distance themselves from clear calls to defund the police from one end of the country to the other by the same politicians that the president is trying to distance himself from. He can't do it. He can't do it. His own vice president raised money. And by the way, he was a part of that too. Everybody seems to forget that part. President Biden was also raising money to establish a bail fund for BLM rioters. He can't run from this stuff. All of this information, regardless of Zuckerberg and all the rest of these guys, is simply a few keystrokes away, and there's nothing they can do about it. Nothing they should do about it either. Everybody should have complete access to all of these pieces of information. It's essential. So the president of the United States keeps taking shots at extreme MAGA Republicans as if we're some kind of a extremist terrorist group. We're not. We're not. I'm not a Republican, but I certainly am all for making America great again. And I happen to believe that everybody in this country should be for making America great again. All of the things that are going on regarding that are destructive to the president's ends. But there are a couple of things that struck me today. Chris Cillizza, with whom I have a love-hate relationship, said in a series of remarks over the last few days, President Joe Biden has made his strategy heading into the 2022 midterm elections crystal clear. Appeal to Republicans who don't align themselves with Donald Trump or his broader Make America Great Again coalition. At his speech in Philadelphia last Thursday, he said, now I want to be very, very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans, are MAGA Republicans. Yes, they are. They absolutely are. 74 million, in fact. This is quantified. What this attempt is to try to separate reasonable Republicans, which have historically worked to the benefit of the Democrat Party in their agenda items, and these harder Republicans that believe in the Constitution of the United States. Once again, he's trying to split this Make America Great Again coalition. I know I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. That's right. You've been able to work with Mitch McConnell. He's not a mainstream Republican. He's a Democrat facilitator. He's the part of this Republican leadership that enables Democrat policy just at a lesser volume. And it's gotten to the point now where the Democrat Party immediately adds $50 billion, $55 trillion to everything they say in order to get the smart and wise Republicans to whittle it down to something that is just a particle of what they wanted. when that particle is $1.9 trillion, $795 billion, actually 739, sorry, $739 billion, $300 billion. Those are the things that he spent right now. The last one, by the way, he spent $300 billion on essentially an executive order. And people are still trying to figure out if that's legal. That I don't think is going anywhere. But I don't think anybody's going to bring up the fact that it's not going anywhere until the election's over. Because that's not going anywhere. The president of the United States cannot spend $300 billion or, depending on who you talk to, $500 billion or $750 billion simply by writing his name on a piece of paper. He can't do it. That's a congressional thing, and Nancy Pelosi said so. That's exactly right. So the question that Chris Cillizza is asking, is there actually a non-MAGA wing of the Republican Party? I would make an assertion that, once again, trying to put everyone into one basket of deplorables is a mistake. But what I would do, and I would certainly do this if I was Donald Trump, I would reference MAGA Republicans as those people who voted for Donald Trump in 2020, 74 million. Because I don't think they've gone anywhere. I don't believe they've gone anywhere. The President of the United States goes out and makes a major policy speech in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and there are 300 people there. President Trump goes to a teeny weeny little arena in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and the place is filled, and there are 10,000 people outside. You can't ignore just the basic facts of all of this. And so the President of the United States, if he actually believes what he's saying, that not all Republicans are MAGA Republicans, just exactly what are the proportions? If MAGA Republicans are those who voted for President Trump, and non-MAGA Republicans are people who did not vote for President Trump, indeed, the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party, how's that wing of the Republican Party doing? Even though that's the wing of the Republican Party that President Biden has always been able to deal with. So is there a non-MAGA wing of the Republican Party? There's also something else we need to discuss. The president is trying to define MAGA Republicans as a fringe part of the Republican Party. Speaking of fringe parts of great American political parties, has he looked inside his own closet lately when it comes to that kind of thing? Once again, there's this unbelievable amount of bias and divisiveness when it comes to even that statement. I'll explain in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817 379 2172. 817 379 2172. By all means, give us a call. Tell us what you think. So, the President of the United States has decided to stop people who want to, quote, make America great again, or MAGA Republicans, saying that this is an extremist fringe group of the Republican Party. The extremist fringe group of the Republican Party are the people like Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and all of these guys, Liz Cheney. That is the fringe part of the Republican Party. Because what we have now is we have a group of people that are interested in making America great again, and they're not. And the president is not. And he keeps saying so. But the idea that a fringe part of the Republican Party exists completely ignores the fact that there is a socialist, progressive, anti-American left fringe in the Democrat Party, and nobody's talking about that party or that fringe. And they most assuredly are extremists. Joining us is Isaac. Isaac, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the Wells Report. Hello.
Very quickly, you have a problem with President Biden calling MAGA Republicans, and he didn't say all Republicans. He said MAGA Republicans, fascists, correct?
Yep.
So where was this same animosity towards the word fascism when Trump used it back in 2020?
Well, it depends on it. There probably isn't any, but it depends on the context. What context are you referring to? You see what they're doing. What the president of the United States right now is doing is categorizing anybody who voted for his political opposition. In other words, his political opposition as fascists. I don't believe that President Trump was referring to, say, for example, his political opposition as fascists based on the fact of who they voted for. I believe what he was talking about was their philosophy.
Did you watch the video? There is the clips now that's available, and he's on the campaign trail, and he did call Democrats fascists. He kind of leaned back like Biden has done and said, well, not all of them are fascists. But again, you can criticize Biden for using the same word that Trump used, but you find wiggle room for Trump. Trump also called football player SOBs. I haven't seen you speak out about that. But imagine if President Obama...
How many Jews? Hey, how many Jews have sons of bitches killed?
That's ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous because we know how many Jews fascists have killed.
You just said that Trump.
Answer my question.
Just using words.
Answer my question.
What about it?
My question is how many Jews have sons of bitches killed?
Well, we can argue that sons of bitches are fascists.
Well, okay. So how many have fascists killed?
You wrote 6 million.
Yeah, that's just a start.
Okay, so
what I'm trying to say is is that when you are referring to your political enemy as fascists, or your political opposition as fascist, that's a completely different thing than discussing the political philosophy of your political opposition.
Actually, he was talking about those people from January 6th who attempted to overthrow the election. He has been.
They were not trying to overthrow the election.
The election deniers who were working behind the scenes. We just had.
Okay. I gotta go. I gotta go, Isaac. Thanks very much for your phone call. I sincerely appreciate it. I wish I could stay, but I gotta go because we got other things that we gotta talk about on the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report, and we shall return in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. We're bringing you the news of the day. We analyze it for fact and bias. We make commentary, and then there's debate, and all of which are welcome. So join us on the chat room, or as you just heard with Isaac, on 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. There is a huge part of the 2022 election. It is much bigger in, let's say, for example, of elective import, about elections that actually mean a huge amount to the people of the United States. There is a huge amount of elective import that takes place outside the federal election sphere. In other words, U.S. House of Representatives, 1/3 of the U.S. Senate, et cetera, et cetera. Those races, and this is a huge crop of them this year, involve governors of states. 36 states will be choosing governors in this election. Huge. Whoa. And there are a bunch of different political facts having to do with exactly what those governors are going to be judged upon as to whether or not they win. 36 states will be choosing a governor for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic started. From Maine to California, gubernatorial elections will be held in 36 states this fall, with most featuring incumbents running for re-elections. Governors were thrust into the national spotlight over the past 2 years because of the pandemic, but also as a result of Washington's paralysis on a host of other issues. That means the national tug-of-war is bleeding over to the state level, and the importance of the chief executive, especially those in battleground states, is coming into focus. This, by the way, did I mention from USA Today? They do this really, really well. They really, really do a wonderful job with these kinds of these digests of several things happening at once. So the national tug-of-war is going to be over gubernatorial offices, and those are just as important, if not more important, than the midterm House of Representatives elections and the Senate elections. Many of the incumbents seeking re-elections were the first line of defense in fighting the disease, COVID-19, in 2020. How they handled the crisis through continued restrictions, school closures, mask mandates will be a point of contention this year. It will be. Because I don't know about your state, but in my state, there was outright abuse of power. Just outright abuse of power. Right up the road, Clay Jenkins is notorious in his abuse of power as the Dallas County judge. Now, in Texas, our county administrators and our county commission, the head of the county commission is the county judge. Okay. And here in Texas, there's a commissioner's court, which is essentially headed by the judge, and that's the county judge. But Clay Jenkins just ran roughshod over the entire county, including Dallas, the city of Dallas proper. It was eye-watering. And a lot of that's on the ballot this year. Beyond COVID-19, gubernatorial candidates are also featuring or facing a series of other challenges, including how they plan to handle violent crime. Violent crime is a problem, mainly in bedrock Democrat cities. Why people continue to vote for that kind of crime and destruction, I have no idea. But it's one of the reasons why I don't live in any of those cities. I don't live in any of those cities where politics is more important than reality. I live in places where reality handles it. So anyway, the way this works is this. How are they going to handle violent crime? What about voting rights? Abortion access in light of the Supreme Court's ruling that turned back Roe v. Wade? According to USA Today, here are the gubernatorial races that they're watching and they believe we should watch. Kemp versus Abrams. It's a rematch of Democrat Stacey Abrams and Republican incumbent Brian Kemp. Abrams lost by half a percentage point in 2018, but now she's a national power groper. Did I say that? Sorry about that. A national power broker with the campaign cash to prove it. She has $18.5 million in the bank. Kemp has $7 million, according to state campaign finance records. But the summer polls show Kemp's popularity remains strong after beating Trump-backed challenger David Perdue, former U.S. Senator, in the primary. 538 shows Kemp holding an average lead of roughly 6 percentage points across roughly a dozen surveys conducted over the summer. I expect that to tighten up just a little bit, but it's not going to be a razor-thin margin of victory this time for Brian Kemp. Political forecasters rate the race as one that leans Republican, even though Abrams is credited as the voting rights champion who helped flip Georgia blue in the last presidential and Senate contests. The thing about that is that more people voted after the supposed Georgia voting laws and the restrictions that she was howling about. More people voted in the subsequent election than voted in the one before that. There was no voter restrictions. There was none. Absolutely none. Okay. No, power broker, not grouper. Okay. Will you stop it? I just made that mistake. It was a groper. Oh, man. Come on. Well, let's keep rolling. A person who's making bets is reluctant to say, yeah, it's a Democrat state. No, it's a very competitive state, which means Republicans have a slight advantage, but they can easily be defeated, according to University of Georgia political science professor Charles Bullock. Wisconsin, Democrat incumbent Tony Evers has hung his reelection hopes largely on blocking the GOP-controlled legislative agenda, including imposition of stiffer election rules. He now faces a Trump-backed challenger in Tim Michels, a construction magnate who, among other conservative politicians, wants to dismantle the bipartisan commission that oversees the state's elections. Evers has also leaned heavily in protecting reproductive rights, offering clemency to doctors who perform abortions under the Wisconsin 1849 anti-abortion law. As of late, Michels has focused his campaign on crime, dinging the governor for not doing more to stop the 2020 riots in Kenosha, which erupted from protests in the aftermath of Jacob Blake, a black man, by police. Let's see. He also put this tweet out. Then and now, when Wisconsin needs leadership, Tony Evers pours gas on the fire. His inaction allowed Kenosha to burn. A Marquette University Law School poll this month shows this is a tight race with Michels trailing by 2 percentage points. Going to get closer. It's going to get closer. We'll see if Evers can pull it out or whether Michels is going to be able to. That will be a harbinger for just how serious Democrat-controlled crime waves around the country are going to affect voters. So Kansas, Kelly versus Schmidt. Kelly is the Democrat, the incumbent, stunned the nation when she won the governor's mansion in 2018. But 4 years later, she's in jeopardy in the deeply red state that Trump won by 14 percentage points. Attorney General Derek Schmidt, the GOP challenger, won the nomination promising to be a governor that would champion religious liberty, combat crime, and oppose abortion. Laura Kelly, on the other hand, has reason for optimism. Kansas voters overwhelmingly rejected a ballot initiative in August that would have removed state constitutional protections for abortion rights. That will be interesting because that will determine a lot of things regarding the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court and its effect on the Republican Party. In Nevada, Sisolak is running against Lombardo. Sisolak versus Lombardo. Sisolak is one of the top gubernatorial targets for Republicans this fall. GOP nominee Joe Lombardo is keeping things close. 538, the website that analyzes political data, shows that Trump-backed Lombardo, who is the Clark County sheriff, trails Sisolak by an average of just 2 percentage points across multiple surveys. While GOP candidates nationally are casting Democrats as anti-police, Sisolak is running ads against Lombardo's record as sheriff, saying he oversaw a spike in Clark County homicides. That'll be a good race. In Arizona, Hobbs versus Lake. From personality to policy, Republican Kari Lake and Democrat Katie Hobbs are polar opposites in almost every way. For starters, Lake, who received President Trump's endorsement, continues to spread false claims about the 2020 election. Okay, once again, she disagrees with the results of the 2020 election is the way you say that. You don't say they're false claims. I am sure if she was lying to herself, there would be false claims. But I'm sure she believes that there were problems with the 2020 election. That doesn't mean they're false claims. That means she is claiming that there are problems with the 2020 election. Report it that way. Hobbs, the Arizona Secretary of State who helped oversee that election, continues to be outspoken against those false assertions of voter fraud. Once again, you can't do that. By the way, Kari Lake said she came out with a brilliant video on elections. You have to watch it. I saw it on Twitter. It's fantastic. Okay? The Arizona race remains a toss-up for political forecasters because so much hasn't been settled. How will independents react to Lake's past statements, current controversies? Jessica Taylor, an analyst at the nonpartisan Cook Political Report, says that she also hasn't been tested at this level at this point. She's going to face problematic issues to reconcile, such as a racial discrimination suit by former African-American female aide, who proved retaliation for raising concerns about making significantly less than her white male peers. Well, it depends on who's making the decisions regarding pay at the circumstance where Kari Lake is working. So we'll see how that works. And then there's DeSantis versus Charlie Crist. Democrats would be delighted if they could put an end to Ron DeSantis' political career, especially as he appears to be gearing up for a 2024 presidential bid. It's going to be a tall order for Representative Charlie Crist, a former governor himself, as the Democrat nominee in a purple state that's been trending red. DeSantis has $130 million in the bank. The approval ratings have remained fairly steady for a conservative firebrand who has resisted COVID-19 mandates and frequently jousted with liberal activists and companies on culture war issues. Florida has not elected a Democrat governor in 30 years. One reason that political forecasters expect DeSantis to prevail. And here in Texas, Democrat challenger Beto O'Rourke's star power is the chief reason liberals and progressives want to give this long shot a second look. Otherwise, Texas is largely viewed as Abbott's race to lose. Both the Cook County Political Report and Crystal Ball ranked it as a likely GOP win. Democrats who want to stretch out the GOP gubernatorial map in 2022 are hoping that Beto O'Rourke's national profile can make the race more competitive. He lost a 2018 race to Republican Ted Cruz by less than 3%. Well, it wasn't actually that close. Ted Cruz was never, ever in danger of losing that race. Now, I want to say something about Beto O'Rourke. First of all, he's a tall, skinny Irish kid from El Paso. Okay? That's thing number one. Thing number two, his national star power means nothing in Texas. Nothing. What means a lot in Texas is that $1 million of money came from George Soros. Beto O'Rourke accepted that donation. That was a mistake. The other one is the statement, hell yes, I'm coming for your AR-15s. Hell yes, I'm coming for your AK-47s. And that in a state who has built a significant portion around the notion of come and take it. Beto, you're not getting our assault rifles. You're not. And that proves that you're an anti-American thug. You're a totalitarian. We have those weapons to defend us from our governments. That's all. And you know it. And to try to get us to lay them down so that you can run over us with a tank, never going to happen. Give George Soros his money back. Give George Soros his money back. Apologize to every weapons owner in the entire state of Texas, and you may only lose by 10%. This is the Wells Report. There's another race out there. Michigan Whitmer versus Dixon. Yeah. We will see how that works. We're going to see that. Tudor Dixon is, man, she is good. Does she have a chance to take out an incumbent Democrat governor in the state of Michigan? We will see. You're listening to the Wells Report. Stick around. We'll be back with more in just a couple of moments. I'll tell you more about that race and one other one in New Mexico, courtesy of the wonderful folks at USA Today. They've come up with this wonderful digest of information regarding these governor races, and there are 36 of them this year. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Make sure you support this broadcast. You can do so financially if you'd like. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report, PATREON/The Wells Report, all one word. And you can subscribe if you'd like. Certainly would appreciate it if you would. It would be nice. Also, by the way, you can join us on the chat room where you can discuss anything you'd like, as long as you keep it chilly, keep it respectful, keep it nice, because we are all those things on the Wells Report. By the way, you can subscribe to this broadcast on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Do it, and make sure that you share it with your friends. I would appreciate it dramatically. Thank you so much for letting me do just a little bit of advertisement for the Wells Report. Let's talk a little bit more about these gubernatorial elections. Gretchen Whitmer is running against Tudor Dixon. All right. Now, the main problem with Gretchen Whitmer that she's got to overcome in this election are her COVID-19 policies. But USA Today is hopefully being able to throw out the thing that the state GOP, with what they call a messy primary, may have taken away that opportunity to hang COVID-19 policy on Gretchen Whitmer. That is wishful thinking. Former Detroit Police Chief James Craig, once thought of as the GOP frontrunner, was removed from the ballot for forging signatures in his nominating petition. Another contender, Republican Ryan Kelly, was arrested by the FBI on charges connected to the January 6th, 2021 riot. Oh, that's convenient. That's convenient. Get rid of a strong Republican based on him enjoying his right to free assembly. Man, when those trials start getting into the federal court system, I mean, really, I'm not talking about the ones of people that just take a plea and try to clean up their lives, or people that genuinely did bad things on the Capitol grounds. But people like this guy, Ryan Kelly, man, he's got a great big case. It's going to end up in a great big courtroom with a great big amount of money riding on it. I wonder how it's going to work out. Anyway, Tudor Dixon, a former conservative media commentator, prevailed after receiving President Trump's backing and financial help from the DeVos family, who are rainmakers in Michigan politics. Early poll numbers show that Whitmer, whose COVID-19 restrictions infuriated Michigan conservatives, is at 50%, with an 11-point lead over Dixon. So once again, Tudor Dixon is going to close that gap dramatically in the next couple of months. But will she be able to get by Gretchen Whitmer? Only if she's able to hang COVID-19 on the incumbent Democrat. Republicans are still rather bullish about ousting Lujan Grisham, who is a Democrat that runs New Mexico. Grisham is now facing a challenge from GOP contender Mark Ronchetti, a former Senate candidate and TV meteorologist. Lujan Grisham has pushed the Democrat-controlled legislature to expand abortion access, create stricter gun rules, and end qualified immunity from prosecution for police officers. Those moves have been the major point of contrast for Ronchetti's campaign, which has been aggressive about supporting law enforcement amid rising crime in parts of the state, as well as defending the U.S.-Mexico border, and an 8-point economic plan that includes oil and gas rebates while he's been speaking on the campaign trail. One area that national observers say distinguishes Ronchetti has been on abortion, where he's tried to strike a conciliatory tone, saying the Supreme Court's ruling on Dobbs gives a chance for measured dialogue on the issue, which is the point. That's good. At least he's trying. Finally, there's this. The GOP hope to make the Keystone State more competitive this year, given that Democrat incumbent Tom Wolf could not seek re-election because of term limits. Trump-backed state legislature Doug Mastriano being the GOP nominee. Political forecasters say the race cannot be considered a toss-up any longer. Mastriano has continued to assert claims that fraud marred the 2020 election. He's also spread misinformation on his social media pages about the COVID-19 vaccine. Well, okay. Which misinformation? Was it misinformation that he cobbled up, or was it misinformation that Anthony Fauci cobbled up? Which misinformation are you talking about here? Let's see what else. Taylor, hold on a second. Let me get this together. I'm trying to figure out who this Taylor person is that they're talking about. Taylor there. Okay, he spread misinformation, and I don't know who this Taylor guy is. Anyway, the GOP hoped to make the Keystone State competitive this year. Tom Wolf couldn't seek re-election. Trump-backed state legislature Doug Mastriano is moving forward. Mastriano is very, very far to the right fringe in that way. He's not trying to move to the middle for independent voters. He's not a candidate that I think will play well in the suburbs. You know, that sounds like Democrat wishful thinking. The polls over the summer showed Democrat candidate Josh Shapiro, the state's attorney general, with a lead averaging 7 points, but more recent surveys of likely voters said that Mastriano was within 3. Yeah, it's going to get closer. All these are going to get closer. And what will happen? Only the voters know for sure, which is exactly the way it's supposed to be. You are watching the Wells Report. Thanks very much for doing so. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Thanks again for joining the Wells Report on this first day after the Labor Day weekend. Back with more in just a moment. Yes, indeed. Thanks very much for joining us. Courts are next.